All right, guys. So for this video, I'm going to be doing a tier list for all the aspects coming to the Smite 2 open beta. We're going to talk about what aspects are, what each god has for their aspect. There's 20 aspects in the game, so not every single god in the game currently has one, but they are going to give aspects to each god, or at least that's the plan. And then I'm going to put them in a tier list, which ones I think are the most viable / the most fun, and we'll talk about them a little bit. But basically just going to explain what aspects are. Now, also, we're doing this live on Twitch, by the way. Say hi, Twitch chat. It's above my camera. If you guys say hi, everybody on YouTube will see all of your beautiful names and such. That's right, Zubba. Say hi, YouTube. Hi, YouTube. Say it. Say it. But anyway, let's just start out in explaining what aspects are. So it's a huge system coming to Smite 2. It's one of the coolest things, in my opinion. It's my favorite thing coming in the patch. Basically, what it does is it allows you to play a different sort of play style, or it gives you a different way to play each character. And all you have to do, you're going to have aspects unlocked for every god. It's not something you have to like unlock through DLC or anything. In the pregame lobby, or when you go to your god page at the home screen, you can just select the aspect. You just click enable, and then it'll change a little bit of how you play the god. So it's best explained when you just go through the examples, but it's a way to open up like role diversity, open up build diversity, maybe make it so like, Medusa traditionally only played in the hunter role, but maybe you can make her more viable in the jungle if you make it so she has a shorter cooldown on her dash if she hits an enemy, or like maybe, Bacchus is traditionally only played in support, but maybe you can make him viable in the jungle by giving him AoE autos with his aspect. But something to keep in mind is that each thing does have a trade-off. So it's not just giving something to the character's kit, because then you would just always choose that aspect. It's also going to remove something away. So, for example, for the Bacchus one, if it gives him AoE autos, maybe he's going to do less damage overall, or he's going to have less utility for his teammates because he's going to be more tailored to the jungle. So that kind of stuff. So that's what aspects are. And it opens up so much content in the game. I think it gives you so much more replayability, because one small change can completely change how you play, build a character and what role you play them in and all that kind of stuff. So it's definitely really good for content. That's why I'm most excited about it. Should be fun for a lot of YouTube videos. So yeah, we're just going to go through the aspects. I'm going to explain what each one does for the character. Hopefully I can do it all by memory. If not, I can open up the game. So like I said, not every character in the game currently has an aspect as of the open beta patch, but they are trying to add them. So not every single one of these will have one. We'll just skip over the ones that don't. Amma doesn't have one yet. Anhur does, though. So the Anhur one is really interesting. I actually don't think it changes his viability, or like what role he's most viable in, because it just gives him a ton of attack speed, which, he's an ADC, so he's going to want to just have that in ADC. So what it does is it removes the prot shred on Anhur's passive. That's the downside. And then the upside is that the more you auto-attack the same target, it has to be a god though, the more you auto-attack the same god, you get attack speed. And it can stack up to 4 times, up to 100% attack speed, so each auto is 25%. And right when you auto something else, whether it's a minion or another god, you lose that attack speed. But like I said, it gives you 100% attack speed. So at level 1, you can basically hit 2.5 attack speed, which would be the cap in Smite 1, but there's no cap on attack speed in Smite 2. In fact, there's no cap on any stat in Smite 2, so come late game, I've done some videos on it, some shorts. You can get like 5.0 attack speed, and you literally look like a machine gun. It's really fun. It's really troll. It doesn't actually change, like I said, his role diversity that much. So I don't think it's that great of a cook, but it's still a lot of fun. And for that, I'm going to throw it in B. For the fun aspect. Viability-wise, you probably just go this always now. The thing is, Anhur isn't that great in Smite 2 compared to some of the other ADCs. So he's just not going to be picked as much. But it is a lot of fun to go. So Anubis doesn't have an aspect yet. Aphra doesn't have an aspect yet. Ares doesn't have an aspect yet. But Athena does. So Athena's aspect is, it allows her to ult enemies instead of ulting your teammates. The downside is that it does no damage. But the upside is, of course, if you have vision on somebody, you can ult them. But you need the vision, of course. Another upside is it gives your teammates damage to the target that you're ulting. So if you ult an enemy raw and your Neith is also hitting that person, during the duration of the ult, they're going to be doing more damage to that raw. However, this is a very bad aspect. It's not good at all. I do not recommend going it. I thought it was going to be pretty good if it actually did some damage, because then you can like nuke people on landing. And of course, it gives people a bunch of time to react. They can Aegis it, they can shell it, they can group up with their team before. So I don't even think it would be that broken if it did damage. But because it doesn't do any damage, I think it's probably one of the worst aspects in the game. I'm going to go ahead and throw it in D, but we might change it to F later on. This is probably the most underrated aspect, in my opinion. What Bacchus' aspect does is it removes the prot scaling in his kit, so that's the downside. But the upside is it gives him AoE autos when he procs his 1. So when you chug, you get AoE autos for 4 seconds. I think it scales up to 6 seconds. And it also scales off strength, the damage that you do with that, instead of scaling off of prots. So it makes it more viable in the jungle and also makes it more viable in solo lane. And I think you just got to test this out for yourself because it does a lot of damage early game. And the AoE autos, especially with being able to execute minions in Smite 2, it feels really good. And I think this one's actually pretty underrated and helps us role diversity a lot when it comes to jungle and solo. So honestly, I'm probably going to throw it in A. And I think it's also quite fun because AoE autos are always fun. And making it possible to play Bacchus jungle or Bacchus solo, even though Bacchus solo has been viable in Smite 2 for a while, it's pretty good. Okay, the Bellona one. I think this character isn't that great right now, so it's going to hurt this a little bit. But her aspect is, it makes it so the benefits from your stances that you're in, so your shield when you get block stacks or your extra healing from your 3, that kind of stuff, you give it to your teammates as well. So if I go this aspect and I play Bellona support, for example, and I dash on somebody with my 1 and auto them 3 times, and I get a block stack, it'll also give it to my teammate. Go to abilities, we click aspect. Oh yeah, so the bludgeon no longer deals bonus damage on the final slam, but you get all the benefits and you give those to your team. So this is supposed to help her in her support role. I haven't seen it really that much. It's really not that great, and she probably needs more in her kit otherwise to actually be viable in support. And this is kind of the only role you'd go this aspect in. Maybe you can do it in solo, but losing out on some of that damage as a solo laner, it doesn't really feel that great. So this one, I also don't think is that great, but I don't think it's quite as bad as the Athena one. And I think part of the reason it's not as good is just because she's not that viable right now. So I'll throw it in C, a little bit in between. Okay, and another one that I think is really cool, but I don't know how viable it is. Maybe they need to buff it, is the Cern one. So what they did with Cern is they removed his range autos with his aspect. So that's the clear downside. Of course, not having range autos kind of sucks. However, your range or your AoE auto or your melee autos are AoE, and your dash cooldown is reset. Not reset, but I think it's 3 seconds off of it. Basic attacks no longer fire projectiles, but deal increased damage, cleave, and apply Shifter of Seasons effect to all enemies hit. In addition, Horn Charge cooldown is reduced when hitting an enemy god. So it's just, I remember testing this and it wasn't scaling off of autos. It says when hitting an enemy god. So it's just if your Horn Charge hits. So your dash cooldown is reduced whenever you hit somebody with it. And then you also get melee AoE autos that apply your 1. It's supposed to help him in jungle. It really hasn't been that great. I don't think it really helps that much. Also, I think maybe if they wanted to make it really cool, they could make the dash reset if you hit somebody with it instead of it just getting a reduced cooldown. That might be kind of broken, but I think it'd be at least fun to try out. But for the time being, it's really not that viable. However, it is quite fun. So because of that, I'm going to throw it in C. And they definitely can buff it just by a little bit and it'll probably be more viable in the jungle. Because I think Cern jungle is actually not that bad. So Chaac aspect. So this one's pretty simple. The downside is you no longer heal with your rain dance or your 3. But it does damage, so it can proc items. It does tick damage, and it's pretty fun and it's pretty cool. It's pretty simple, but I think it can change a whole lot. It can make it more viable in mid. I think it's somewhat viable if you're going to build it in like a damage role, like mid or jungle, and maybe even solo. I think in solo you still want to have regular Chaac just because that healing, Chaac healing is ridiculous. But keep in mind, in Smite 2, Chaac's passive also heals him. Every 5 autos you use an ability, you get a flat heal from that. So you can kind of get away with it, but I think it's fun and a little bit more viable than some of this other stuff. So I'll throw it in B tier. Moving on, Cupid. Baron doesn't have one. Cupid does have one. I think I know it off the top of my head, but I'll just go in just to make sure. I believe it's Cupid's is that you heal with your 1, or you give a shield to your teammates with your 1. I'll just read it out. Heart Bomb's damage is decreased, but the enemy hit has reduced attack speed and the explosion area heals allies. At 8 stacks of Love Struck, allies also gain a health shield. So your Heart Bomb is going to heal your teammates and give them the health shield if you have your passive stacked up. But also when you have the Heart Bomb on them, they're going to have reduced attack speed. So this is a clear way to make Cupid's support more viable. And I think like in Joust, this is actually really, really strong. You go this aspect in Joust and fight with your team. It can be really, really good. Help in those like small skirmishes. You go some like short cooldown active items like Lifebinder and such. However, in Conquest, Cupid support's just really not that viable. And he doesn't really have great engage. His peel is really good, and if you fight together and use his healing, it can be quite strong. And I think it's fun, though. And I think it's cool that you can make it more viable. The one problem with some of these aspects, or future ones, is that it's very easy to make aspects that heal or give utility to your team. It's a lot harder to make aspects that reward like aggressive play. Because like you could look at every character in the game and like just be like, okay, well, what if they just did less damage, but they healed their teammates with this, or they gave them damage mitigation or something like that. You know what I mean? So I think they need to maybe not cook as many aspects that are like that, but I think Cupid's a clear candidate for somebody that would be good with it. So it's fun, and I think it's somewhat viable. I think it's probably a slightly stronger than Bellona and Cern, but I don't think it's quite up there with like Anhur and Chaac, even though I don't even think Anhur's is that great, but it's at least fun. Okay, moving on. Danza actually has an aspect. I don't even need to go look at it. It's pretty simple as well. Your 2 no longer throws out your, what is it, the sake. It doesn't throw out the bottle anymore to taunt people. It just instantly spawns 2 clones. So in Smite 2, Danza's a little bit different. He actually spawns clones with his passive now. I think it's like a really small chance to spawn a passive clone when you auto someone. But now with his aspect, you no longer have the CC or the damage on the 2, but you instantly spawn 2 clones. So you can get a lot of clones going if you go this aspect. Again, probably not that viable, but I think part of the reason it's not as viable is because the character itself isn't as good right now. So that could help him out a lot, and then you might bump up a bit. However, I think I'll probably throw it in C as far as Conquest goes. Fenrir, another character that isn't as viable right now. A lot of these it's kind of troll because the character themselves just aren't as good, but because a lot of these characters have been in Smite 2 for a while, and they were really strong at one point, and they had to nerf him a bunch, so they should probably show some love to him. But yeah, Fenrir's aspect is he no longer gets as much damage from his 2. Brutalize deals less damage, but applies a stacking slow. In Seething Howl, buff effects are decreased, but applies to all allies in an area around him. So this is supposed to help him with his support viability. So less damage on the 3, but it slows. And the slow stacks, I'm pretty sure, so it's pretty noticeable. But then also you get less benefit for yourself from your 2, but you can give it to all your teammates. So kind of like an AoE, like a little lifesteal, almost like an Ares 2, or maybe like a Frenzy or something like that, because it gives the attack speed as well to them. So it definitely helps out his support viability, and I actually think this one's pretty cool and like pretty freaking good because Fenrir support is already something that you want to play. I just think the character right now isn't amazing, but because it helps out his support viability, and it's like definitely something that you would choose if you were going to play him in support, whereas if you were going to play him jungle, you wouldn't choose it. I think I'd throw it in B just because it's got some viability. It's not as fun, but you know, it could be kind of fun to help out your teammates and stuff, especially like you go this in Joust as well. Another thing, you know, Joust or Assault can be very helpful for them. So Hades doesn't have an aspect. Hecate has an aspect. Hers is pretty interesting. So it makes it so her 2 no longer is a refire ability. So Hecate 2, you click it. If people use abilities in the area around that, it charges it up and it does more damage. However, with her aspect, you no longer have the second part where you throw it out and do damage. All it does is when you click 2 now, if people use abilities in that AoE, it drops like a bomb on them. It drops like what your, for all intents and purposes, what your 2 is normally. It drops damage and it procs items. It's supposed to be like a, you know, anti-mage aspect and anti-mage ability, but it's really not that great, and it really, really hurts her farming because she loses a whole damaging ability. Because again, the enemies have to use abilities for it to do damage. So if you're just going to clear the jungle, your 2 doesn't do anything to the jungle. So it hurts her farming, and there's a lot of farm on the map, so it's quite bad. I think they could buff it. There's one way they could buff it that I suggested, where if people use ultimates in it, it does like 2x or even 3x the damage, so they can really get punished for using an ultimate inside of it. Or make it so somehow you can use it on jungle camps so you can actually farm with it. But right now, it's really bad. And it's really not that fun. The only fun you can have with this if you can go it in solo and go a proc build, because you're pretty hard to kill because it'll just randomly proc like Shield of the Phoenix, which is like Glad Shield, Reaver, stuff like that. They're just going to get owned by that and you'll be really hard to kill. Maybe Soul Gem as well helps with that. But yeah, really not that viable. Although it is quite fun, so I'm going to throw it in C because of that. Just because it's fun with that build. Okay, Hades doesn't have one. Herc does have an aspect. Another aspect that's supposed to help their support viability, and I'll show you why. I just want to get the right numbers because, again, Herc also isn't very good in the game right now. So his aspect really hasn't been able to be cooked all that much. So Mitigate Wounds no longer heals based on damage taken or provides attack speed. Instead, you gain a stack when you or nearby allied gods take damage from basic attacks, and when the ability ends, stacks are expended to heal nearby allied gods. So instead of you just healing yourself with your 3 or getting attack speed, you're going to spread out that heal to your teammates, basically. It's pretty simple, honestly. But yeah, not the most viable character right now. I think if you were going to play him support, it would help out a lot. And again, this goes back to what I just said about aspects, is it's really easy to cook up aspects that heal your team or help out your team. So this one I'm not really intrigued by all that much. I don't think it's quite as bad as the Athena one. It definitely helps out his support viability if you're going to play him there, so I'll throw it in C. Izanami doesn't have one. Jingwei doesn't have one. Okay. The Khepri one is just such a meme. And it could be good if it was better. So what the Khepri aspect does is it makes it so your pull no longer pulls people. You can't move backwards with your pull. However, you stay in place. You're still CCing them the whole time. And while you're CCing them, you're autoing them. So you're swiping your claws. I don't know if there's actual animation for it. I think you auto them like 4 or 5 times. I don't believe it scales off attack speed, but it does proc auto attack effects. So if you have like a Kin Size or like a Braggy's Harp or any of those auto attack items, Executioner, you will be hitting them with that when you're pulling them with your one pulling. So it's pretty good meme potential. It's just not good enough, and I don't know. I think it's literal troll. One thing I said they should have done for Khepri is make him more viable in the jungle, and his aspect could have been that he can refire his 2 to TP to the end of it, and his pull becomes a push like Gilgamesh kick that he can push people into others and it will stun them. And then if he ults himself, he gets like a crazy steroid effect where he gets a lot of extra strength and a lot of extra int, so he can be viable as like a jungler. And I thought that would be cool. I mean, but this one's pretty cool. Trying to make it more viable as like an auto attacker, like a meme build. It's pure meme, so like this will never like never. I would never say never, but I don't think it'll be viable really ever. So, but it's kind of fun. I'm gonna throw it in C for now. And actually, I'm gonna move Danza's up to B, and then I'm happy with that for now. Kukulkan does not have an aspect. Loki does. So Loki's aspect is he no longer applies a debuff or does damage with his one. I believe he doesn't do damage with his one. I'm pretty sure. But he gives his invis. He gives the invis effect from his one to the nearest teammate. So he can make another teammate invisible with him. So the same duration of the invisibility. So you can go in with another teammate and both be invisible. So I think it's a cool aspect, more so for like support, because you're never really want to go to this in jungle. Maybe solo lane if he was ever viable there, but you're losing out on damage. And in Smite in general, it's hard to lose a whole damage ability. So you're often not going to go for an aspect that does that, similar to the Hecate one or Hecate 2. But I think it's pretty good for that reason, especially in Joust and stuff. I think you could see it cooked up, but for now, I'm just going to throw it in C. Medusa does not have an aspect. Mordred most definitely has an aspect. Yo, Austin, thanks for 35 months of the Prime, dude. Welcome back to the Fonzo family. Mordred aspect is you no longer knock up with your dash. Now, this is going to sound so troll when you hear it, if you haven't heard this one yet. You no longer knock up with your dash, which is your interact button. However, every ability you hit resets your dash cooldown. And Mordred does not have very long cooldowns, especially if you going any normal like soul lane or jungle build. So you can basically just run around and dash around in every team fight. He's sort of like King Arthur in that way, sort of like old Ratatasker who was bouncing around in team fights way back in the day. It's insane. It's one of the best aspects. It's a ton of fun. It's 100% going in S tier. Because honestly, there's no reason to play normal Mordred now. You just always should use his aspect. The aspect version of Mordred. So they should probably do something about base Mordred. I don't think they should nerf the aspect that much because it's just super fun and it gives people like a reason to play him and want to play him. They should probably nerf it a little bit, but I think they should just change his base kit a little bit. Because Mordred's one of these characters that was pretty cool at first, but compared to like Aladdin and Hecate, I just don't think he's as cool and has as much replayability. But yeah. Okay. So yeah, Mordred definitely an S tier. The only downside, like I said, is that he doesn't knock up with his dash. That's the only downside, which is so troll because the knockup really isn't that relevant anyway. It doesn't go that crazy. So Broken Weave explosions no longer root enemies and the buff has a reduced duration. However, the attack speed gained is much higher. Additionally, using World Weaver provides stacks of Broken Weave. So basically, you're removing the root from activating your passive weaves on the ground, but you're giving yourself a ton of attack speed. So this is supposed to help her with an ADC build. It's pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory. Neith in general has gone more for like a ability-based build throughout all of her existence. So this is supposed to help auto-attack Neith. I think it's pretty good. I'd probably throw it in B, kind of similar to Anhur. It does help out her role diversity a little bit because she's mostly played mid nowadays with an ability build. But maybe you can play it in ADC, get a little bit more attack speed, go an auto-attack build, a proc build, and you'll be more viable. As far as fun goes, I mean, having more attack speed is always fun. But it's more simple, not as much cooking going on with that one, so I'm happy with B. Nemesis aspect. Okay. Nemesis aspect is the downside is that you ult anybody when you're full HP, because what her ult does now with the aspect is it averages out your HPs. So, and I don't think it means like if you're 100% HP and somebody's 10%, I don't think it's going to make you have 50%. I think it's only the reverse. So what it does is if you're 10% HP and somebody's 90% HP, you both go to 50%. So it's a way to like 1v1 somebody and use it as like a last ditch, like get out of jail free card in 1v1s. And it's pretty cool. The only problem is it's affected by anti-heal. If it wasn't affected by anti-heal, I think it would be a lot stronger. But it's pretty interesting. And it's sort of like Lady Geist ult from Deadlock, except it's not a health swap. And Lady Guy's ult can't be affected by anti-heal, whereas Nems can in this game, and it's just an average. So it's not that crazy. And because it's affected by anti-heal, I don't think it's really that great, but I'll throw it in B because I think it's still pretty cool. And it's just like, it's something that people have to be aware of. Like, they can't just like run at you. It's very similar to Lady Guy's, where like, if a Nem is really low and she has her ult up, you can't just like sit there and try and kill her. And remember, she also gets a sick heal from her shield, so she can really turn a fight with that. But yeah. Okay, so Nuwa doesn't have an aspect. Odin doesn't have an aspect. Pele does not have an aspect. Poseidon doesn't have an aspect. But Ra most definitely does. Ra has an aspect. So you guys probably seen it in some of my videos and stuff, but Ra aspect is awesome. I'm going to go ahead and instantly throw in an S tier, and I'll explain why. So his downside is that he gets less scaling or no scaling on Solar Blessing, which is his heal, his 3, and no scaling on his ult. Those are his downsides. Keep in mind, his ult still hits for a lot, base damage-wise. His upsides with the aspect are, 1, he can attach his heal to his teammates. So it'll follow them around if you click it in the middle on them. He can aim his ult now, and his ult heals his teammates if he hits them with it for 800 damage at max rank. It's a huge burst heal. He can aim his ult, and it still does a lot of damage, so it's pretty unmissable on enemies. And of course, the heal following people is really strong for fighting and for skirmishes. This is going to be really OP in Joust. It makes him much more viable as a support and a solo laner, even though he's pretty good in solo because of that change to his 2 they made in Smite 2. It's very, very strong, and it's a ton of fun. It's probably my favorite aspect that they've added. It just makes him a lot more fun, I think, for those roles. I mean, if you want to play Ra mid, you don't want to go this aspect because you lose so much damage on your ult. You want to be able to one-shot people with your ult. But if you're going to try and play him in support or in solo, and of course, it won't be troll if you play him in support because this makes him a lot better in support, then you definitely want to go this aspect. And trust me, it's a lot of fun. You should try it out. Okay. Sobek doesn't have an aspect. Sol doesn't have an aspect. Susanna doesn't have an aspect, but Thanatos does. And Thanatos' aspect is actually pretty good in my opinion, and it's pretty cool. I'll go ahead and read it off to you. Harvester of Souls no longer heals Thanatos, but provides permanent max HP. Harvester of Souls, of course, is passive, so you're no longer going to be healing from your passive. That's the downside. But it does provide permanent max HP. So it's sort of like, what was that character in Predecessor? I always forget his name. Whatever. There's a character in Predecessor it's kind of like. So it provides permanent max HP, so every last hit you can get on something, you're going to get more and more HP as the game goes on. I think I did a video on it, and I think I got to 5,500 HP, which is insane as a Thana solo. But additionally, your Soul Reap deals bonus damage and heals Thanatos based on his max health. So you're still healing from your 1, and you're still healing from your 3 now with this aspect, and it's healing you based on a percentage of your max HP. So it's very synergistic with the passive that you have with this aspect. You're increasing your max HP, and then your 3 is going to heal you for your max HP and deal damage based on your max HP. So it's really, really strong. I think it's a lot of fun. Helps out his soul lane viability, and pretty much just that, because you're probably not going to play like Thanatos support, but you can go this aspect in jungle and go more of a tanky route anyway as well. Go like that dirty bubble build from years ago. But yeah, this one's pretty fun. Also, I think pretty strong. I'm going to throw it in A. Mori, another super strong aspect. I'm going to go ahead and already throw in A. Basically what it does is it makes it so you can't go invis with your 3. You place your decoy and it will walk straight for you. You're not invis during this whole time, but if you refire your 3, you'll TP to it. So the downside, no invis. The upside is that you can TP to your decoy. I think it's super strong. It's also a lot of fun. I'm pretty sure it's just better than her regular aspect. So if this character is super viable and they fix some of the bugs that she's had in Smite 2, you probably just always play with her aspect and never go the base one. Unless you really want to be like super cheese, invis, one-shot people out of your invis, then you can go that route. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. I also think it's really strong. So I'll throw Morrigan's in A. Thor no aspect, Yemoja no aspect, Ymir no aspect, Zeus no aspect, and then last, and certainly not least, although maybe his aspect's a little bit least, we have Geb. So Geb's +1s in Smite 2 are a lot of fun. He's super cool. You definitely should play him come whenever he's out in the game, open beta or whatever. However, his aspect is he no longer knocks up with his 2. That's the downside. But the upside is that it's an AoE around him. And for every enemy he hits, he gets a reduced cooldown on his 2. So you can pretty much spam this. It's supposed to help him more as like a damage dealer Geb, like a full damage Geb. But it doesn't really help that much because damage Geb is kind of troll because his 1 has 50% scaling and his 2 has 50% scaling. So he kind of does no damage with those items, or with a full damage build with this aspect as well. But you can spam it because the 2 can be a pretty short cooldown. And it's, it's a lot of fun, especially for farming. You can literally hyper farm with it. But I think if they just increase the scaling on his 1 and his 2, he'd be really viable as a damage dealer. So, but it's fun, and being able to get like cooldowns back really fast, being rewarded for hitting enemies is always cool. So, in fact, I might even throw that in A. But I don't know if you ever really, you definitely don't want to go in solo, and you definitely don't want to go in support. Maybe if you're playing like Geb mid or Geb jungle, I'll throw it in A for that reason. But the knockup is still really strong, especially in Smite 2, because Geb's 1 is pretty much unmissable now because you can jump on people with it. So you can knock up with your 1 into a knock up with your 2, and it's a crazy CC chain. It's very good for chasing people and whatnot. So as far as fun and viability, I'll just throw it in A, but probably the least viable in the A tier. So yeah, and I believe that's all the aspects in the game. Just with some tweaks, some of these could be a lot more fun or a lot more viable. And maybe some tweaks to the characters themselves, because a lot of these characters in C tier are just not very good right now. So that's part of the reason the aspect isn't that fun, because it just doesn't make the character feel much better when they're not even viable. But yeah, in fact, I might even throw Athena's in F, dude. I just don't think you should ever go that aspect. There's just zero reason to. Apart from maybe like you go Nuwa with Athena and then you punish split pushers by like Nuwa ulting for vision and then Athena ulting over to them. But yeah, I mean, even if you're full damage and you ult in with this Athena aspect that's supposed to be good for jungle, you're just going to get one shot because your ult's not doing any damage. So yeah, I just don't think it's that great. I'll throw it in D though, because I think it's a fun idea. They just need to tweak it a little bit, maybe make it do damage or do something else. Those are the aspects coming into the game, I believe. Actually tomorrow, it depends on when this video is uploaded, but if you're live on stream, it should be out tomorrow. So yeah, try them out. Highly recommend trying them all out. They're all fun. Like I said, a lot of them could be even more fun with just a few small tweaks, but definitely try out these ones that I talked about up here. And some of this, like I said, in Joust is going to be more viable. The Cupid aspect is sick in Joust and Assault. Same probably with the Hecate one, the Raw one as well. But yeah, that's aspects in Smite 2. Super cool change coming to the game. I can't wait for the more aspects to come out, for them to cook even more. But yeah, if you have any questions about aspects or anything like that, leave them down in the comments below. But that's it. Stay safe and healthy as always. Peace out. Say bye. Bye, YouTube chat. Say it. Say bye to your YouTube, Twitch chat. Bye. Bye.